I'm wondering if the natural flushing and rainfall might not be nature's answer to pathogen buildup. Having them drain flushed once in a while could be solving some of that buildup issue.
I would say try it. It's very difficult to have a full shade area that has enough precipitation, because you'd need like a north-facing slope that still has full shade. I don't know. I would say as long as the liquid drains, I don't see why it would be an issue. I mean, the species lives in areas where it rains now, and somehow they're still here. So I would say it's probably not, but based on our engineered technology, the goal is to never let liquids pool, and a downpour maybe could start taking the particulates and flushing them down to the gravel area and they start clogging it up. I don't know. It's never come up. I would say try it and see what happens. If you get horrible stink, then it maybe wasn't the best idea.
If you wash out microbes.
I don't know that rain would, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Microbes and nutrients would wash away.
It would wash away the nutrients.
Wash away nutrients for sure.
Just like a compost pile exposed to rain.
Rain is going to particularly get rid of the pathogens. The pathogens can cling pretty good, you know.
So it makes me think about human manure and composting, and you don't want it to be, you know, if nothing else, you want something built up around the bottom of your human manure system.
Right.
Water from rushing away, because that spreads the pathogens worse than it just sitting there.
There are a couple people who are looking at doing this for human manure and human poop, and it breaks it down pretty quick. It's pretty scary. Well, because we're an omnivore, most of us.
Similar diet to it.
Yeah, they seem to really like our poop. The original scientists that are, you know, my boss and the company, they have devised a couple technologies that utilize human manure but they never were mass produced, because they're primarily for the developed world. And how many Americans have composting toilets? And yeah, I mean, I wish we didn't flush fresh water down to process our waste. It's kind of crazy, and I think 100 years from now we'll be like, oh, they used to use fresh water to get rid of waste. Or that's like saying they used to actually burn fossil fuels to produce energy. Like, they're gonna laugh at us in the future.
I think we'll be lucky if they're around there.
Yeah, that's true. I know that when I see improperly maintained composting toilets where they have at some of the state parks, I've noticed they're infested with black soldier flies, which is great because they're getting rid of the waste. And there's no smell, which is awesome too.
Well, they're not vectors.
And they're not vectors. But just anytime you're using human waste, I worry, because there's the potential for making yourself sick just from contamination issues. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to be the future of black soldier fly and human manure and human waste, but there's definitely potential. But
so what's a creative way for, I guess it would have to be at least a family of 4, and with something like that, somebody who has a direct connection to at least one restaurant.
Or coffee shop, or brewery, or remember, they're also going to eat duckweed, and everybody has access to urine, and everybody has access to just little kiddie pools and troughs where they can put water that gets stagnant. You put duckweed in there, it doubles every single day.
What does urine have to do with that?
Urines are great fertilizer for aquatic plants. Yeah, for duckweed. Or you can get Miracle Grow, which is probably the wrong approach.
Urine leaves the body sterile, except salmonella can be passed through urine.
Yes, you
and
can.
some tropical diseases can be passed through.
Everybody I want who hasn't tried growing duckweed, please try it this summer. You're going to be so pleased you do. The chickens love it, and it's a great food for the black soldier fly. But try to network with a local eatery. They're going to be so happy you're taking their waste. But
What do you do with duckweed then?
any swamp.
Exactly.
Any swamp should have it.
Or any real shady pond.
Shady pond. Yeah, it looks like, would you say two leaves about this big? It's a very small aquatic plant. So I'd say that's close up.
Floating on the surface.
Floating on the surface, tiny, 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 tiny.
And it's invasive too.
It is invasive. Don't put it in your pond.
Yeah.
Unless your pond, of course, is a reconverted pool, and then that'd be great to put in there. Yeah, I just love it. That's so awesome. I know somebody in California whose business is reconverting useless chlorine ponds to aquaponics. Is that awesome? Can you imagine that's your job?
That's what
What's the
she's
name
doing.
of the company?
I have no idea. I don't remember.
There's
My
a company in
husband's pissed
Phoenix.
off
Right?
because the frogs are so loud he can't hear his TV.
Wow. I haven't heard that being a problem yet. That's definitely a first. Yeah, that's Americans shouldn't be so lucky as it being that's their major problem.
Less TV.
How are you collecting fluid?
Patrick, say again, buddy.
How are you collecting the fluid? I get mad about
If I want to collect the liquids, I just put a little tray under there and then I harvest it.
There's also though, right? Didn't you say you can plumb it?
You can. Oh yes, if you're over-engineering type and you just want to make this just over-engineered, use the center part as your drainage sink. Now we don't pre-drill because if we did, the metric people scream that we drill the standard hole, and the standard people scream that we drill the metric hole. So we don't drill at all and let you decide if you want to be imperialist or globalist. You know, you decide. And you can set up a spigot or anything, Pat, and just collect it that way. The problem is, if you have ADHD or you forget things, holy smokes, that liquid backs up really quick. Make sure you know to empty it because it'll back up in just a couple days. So if your system's closed, it's going to produce liquids very fast.
That center hole is lower than.
Yeah, it is.
This is the lowest point.
And there's a little bit of a bump downwards.
So could I do the 8 to 10 holes in the other quadrants and still do the center?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll get both. And again, you could just do a tray, like a little elevated tray, like something like that.
Can you say more about how you would use the effluent if you're using it? Are you just pouring it in your compost pile?
Okay, yeah, let's go over effluent. I personally drain 95 to 99% of my effluent into the mulch below. That mulch becomes biologically rich, nutrient rich. I throw it in my muscadine grapes, okay, at the end of the year. I shovel it out. It's very decomposed too, by the way. It's awesome. If you're collecting it and capturing it, there's a couple beneficial uses. Number one is you're going to use it to set up a new unit and try to attract pregnant females. You can do it by maybe coating the inside of your pod. Maybe when you decide you want to capture some eggs, you can put some of the liquid in there or put it on the piece of cardboard. You could even put it maybe on the burlap and soak the burlap with it. It's going to repel other species of flies. It's going to attract the black soldier fly females, and it's going to be microbially active. So there's a couple benefits. You don't need a lot of it. I just want to stress that you don't let it back up in your pods because it can cause anaerobic conditions really quick. So you got to let it drain, Rebecca. And remember, it's not just about backing up anaerobic. You don't want to let it pool. So don't do it on concrete and let it stagnate and you just have a liquid sitting there. The black soldier fly females will get confused and they'll start laying little eggs there, and that egg case is lost. You want to scrape it off with a razor blade and something and dump it in, because just don't do it on impermeable surfaces. Yes, ma'am.
But you get pots and pots of it, not way more than you need for bait.
You get tons of liquids. That's why I don't even save it. I just save a little bit each year, and it's enough for ever. It's not a nice smell. I would say the effluent's it's definitely not your top 10 smells. So
In the mulch under
Maybe not
there
top
all that
1,000.
whole time.
draining into mulch, it tends to eventually impart a nice earthy dirt smell. And I think because the mulch is so porous,
How deep's your mulch?
my mulch is however deep it is when I set it up. So what I do is usually there's leaves and stuff around the pod. I just go like this and do that. And if there's a bag of mulch, I'll throw that in. So it's whatever I can fit in the time I'm allotted. I try not to waste too much time over engineering it. Yeah, you could go buy a thing of pine mulch or something like that. But remember, you're basically taking that semi-poor nutritional mulch and you are activating it. So use that. Use that somewhere like in your orchard. Use it on your hardy kiwi, which you should be growing.
Yes. We are.
Whatever. Everything that is perennial, that is food, you should have at least 5 of. And just do it. What, Pat?
The fact that the effluent will get them to lay eggs where you don't want them turned to an advantage for me because I want winter production. So I found that with our homemade one, which I want people to look at some point, the stuff dripped out and they did lay the eggs there, and there were thousands and thousands of tiny first instar grubs. I then took those, put them in a soda bottle, put a little bit of straw in for them to just have a little bit of aeration and stuff. My partner doesn't live with me all the time, so I stuck it in the fridge. And it sat in the fridge for 8 weeks. I looked at them and thought, those guys are dead. I threw them in a bucket that was going to the compost bin. When I got to the compost bin, they were crawling around. So that means that 8 weeks after they've stopped laying eggs, I could still be inoculating larvae into my greenhouse, which is going to be warm enough for lots of time in the daytime where they would be active and growing. So maybe next time I do this, it's for 12 weeks. Maybe this is a way to get that winter production without getting mating and egg laying in the wintertime.
I forgot to mention one thing. A lot of people want to force dormancy and put these in the fridge. The fridge is too cold for grubs. Your wine refrigerator is the perfect temperature for grubs. So if you see on Craigslist a wine refrigerator, Mary, you buy it, because that's where you're going to store your grubs. Anytime you find a wine fridge, people will be like, why are you looking for a wine fridge? Because you have grubs.
So what's the temperature range?
50s.
50s?
Yeah.
But
It's good. It's for dormancy. You want to keep a couple and you want to save them alive. Refrigerators are too cold.
What about a root cellar?
Pretty good.
yeah, mine lived 8 weeks.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's a very hardy grub. The grub is hardy. The adult is very chemically sensitive, but the grub is really hardy. Yes, Edward.
I believe Pat said that you need to treat the effluent like a raw manure.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility of using it and aerating it to turn it into like a compost tea?
I've only had one person do that, and it was in DeSoto, Texas, and he swears by it, and he actually buys these pods just to create grub tea. It's the only one I know on the planet doing it. His name is a name that's escaped me. He is an agricultural ministry, and I could get you the name if you're interested, and you can look at his research. I don't know the protocols or mechanisms involved. I think there's some proprietary stuff going on, but I did see his garden, and it was crazy doing well, incredible. Like I should probably be doing this because I have, open time from 3 to 4 a.m.
Yeah. It's going to definitely kick. Yeah. It's just that you got to remember that if you don't get processed to further reduce pathogens, you could be spreading pathogens out.
And what he adds as the energy for the compost tea, molasses, I don't know what he's doing.
I'm almost wondering if you could use it as a seed stock for making some biofertilizer.
You know what? I mean, Edward, we might find that there's some beneficial microbes in there that knock out some really bad fungi that are really replete in the garden, like maybe blossom end rot. Who knows? Yeah, I mean, who knows? I just wish there were more people doing research, but unfortunately there's more Americans shopping. And yeah, no. One thing I wanted to mention, guys, is what I do. I have problems with raccoons on the farm, and they will basically, if you have a little bucket underneath your, you have a little bucket underneath your port and they fall in, the raccoons will just do this, and they'll eat your grubs. And I don't produce this for raccoons. I produce it for the chickens and fish. So I take this. This does fit well on here. You just have to, fit it. Have everybody seen the circular clamps you put around? Just put one.
What's the ID?
It's in the manual.
Okay, thank you.
I forget. I can't remember. I think that's about what, 1 3/4. That looks it. It should say on the side. He's a bright guy.
If you have a hard time.
Okay, so this is a 2-inch, and that would assume the entire thing's 2 inches, but that's probably 1 3/4.
If you have a hard time getting that on, stick it in some hot water.
Or maybe 1 1/2.
It says 2 and then it says 1 1/2. I can't.
Okay, 2, 1 1/2. Yeah. So anyway, I would definitely use a clip, a band clip, whatever they're called. What's the actual word for these? Oh, hose clamp. Oh, like as in a hose? All right.
Kind of like that,
Yeah, you can pass that around, play with it. The clamp is because I know they're all standardized with numbers, number 24. So number 24, stainless steel clamp. Make sure you get stainless steel or it just rusts and it becomes a nightmare. Then what I do is I cut this, and because remember, you've elevated the pod, but your collection bucket can be on the ground. You sort of want to judge this so that you have enough length. And I got this at Lowe's, by the way. so that I drill a 2-inch hole in here, put the hose down. The raccoons can't figure it out.
They knock it around on you?
They do, but the hose is so, here, feel this. The hose is so stiff that they can't seem to get the bucket like off of it, and so they get frustrated and leave. And it seems to be stiff enough to just keep the bucket in place. But you don't want it too short. You want some length to go down in there, because if not, then they can just sort of knock it off.
See, those are those rally raccoons. We got smarter raccoons up here. I mean, I've had raccoons unscrew jars. They can take the lid off the bucket easy. Easy.
Well, I know the
that.
state-employed raccoons have different intelligence than the wild ones, and Brian will probably attest to that. So, anyway, that's what a little trick is to save some of your grubs from predation. Also, possums too. Skunks. Hopefully not, but
anything.
yeah, there's everything. You can get everything like scrubs, just like your chickens and fish. I mean, when you start feeding these to your chickens, you think that there was a narcotic in there. I mean, I don't know who has fed them to chickens. Who's actually done that? Okay, so you guys know. It's crazy scary, right, Bart? Yeah. They actually hang out around the pod, Rebecca. They'll hang out around the pods just because they know what's in there. And by the way, do not put these in with the chickens. They'll torment the pod to try to get in, and they'll catch the females as they're laying eggs or trying to get in. Don't put these in your chicken coops, okay? You won't get appreciable grubs.
How does your large pod compare with the one that they built for self-harvesting?
They've replaced theirs with these. So, yeah, the bioconversion rate of the do-it-yourselfers is less because of the ramp problems. Why we're lucky is we own the patents to the ramp technology, so we've perfected it over years. There is some variation, and there's some definite improvements that we've made over the time. If you look at the ramp, see how there's a lip now that's next to it? That limp actually made a big difference because they weren't falling off the ramp anymore. And we've changed the angles over the years to be more attuned to their natural instincts. Yeah, you just changed a little bit. The ramps are different in the pods, and it's fine because there's such low distance to go in the little ones that they actually don't, the big ones, they don't circumnavigate as much. In Florida and the humid areas, they'll actually claw up vertically because there's so much moisture on the sides. But here in the Carolinas, I've only noticed that maybe once or twice in my life where it's so moist and humid out here that they actually start crawling up the sides. But you probably won't see that. But what other questions can we have, Pat, before we have to turn it over to Brian?
So what kind of time frame should I be allotting if I was to have something like that?
You mean when it starts? You'll start seeing black soldier fly in about 2.5 weeks.
How much time do I need to give it attention?
To get the what?
How much attention do I need to give it? How much time?
About 10 to 15 minutes every time you go feed it.
So every 2 or 3 days.
Every 2 or 3 days. I basically go in mine every 2 or 3 days, maybe 3 or 4.
So you don't feed them daily? I thought you said to feed them daily.
Theoretically, I should feed them daily.
Okay. All right.
I have other things to feed. I really try. But the great thing is,
The time it takes to feed you.
you know, the great thing is they're very neglect forgiving. And I just try not to starve them. And sometimes I'll put in a little bit too much food if I know I'm going to be away. But come up with your own schedule. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. But I think you'll find your time efficiency is very good use. It's a good use of your time in regards to what its production. And the reason is the auto harvesting, the auto crawl off. That makes it worth your time.
Please describe the details of your visit. You go, you take the burlap off.
Yeah, I take the burlap off. I dump the food scrap in. If I detect odor, I go around and clump it and find if there's a clump and I break it up. If it's overly moist, I'll add something dry. If it's overly dry, I'll add moisture or some scraps that have been soaked in liquid water. Because, you know, scraps can be hydrated with just water. If you have a bucket of waste and your pod's kind of dry because of a heat wave or something, throw some water in there. Let the food scrap soak it up. You've just introduced moisture and you don't have to be around to deal with it. You've just added it. So it's really a happy medium between too much moisture and too little moisture, but you'll learn it quick. Also, before I answer that question, Mr. Brown, there's a signature odor associated with black soldier fly colonies, and you'll figure out what it is. That wasn't it, okay? Did anybody smell that?
Real close.
That's not it either. There is an odor that's associated with black soldier fly colonies. That signature odor, and you'll learn it, is the odor you always want to have. Anybody had honeybees? You know the odor associated with it? It's sort of like a sweet citrus odor, and it's what's called, I call a signature odor for the species. There's a signature odor for this species. When you start smelling that, you'll know you have a good colony, and you'll know it's doing well because they emit it.
And so when are you going to come out with a signature odor spray that you can spray on your...
Or powder or whatever, I know. There's so many things and opportunities we can do, but right now I think the best approaches is a sort of a permaculture approach where you fit this into your component of sustainable feed, because remember, the goal is to get off the GMO processed feed. That stuff isn't real, and it's not even produced at cost. It's subsidized by the taxpayers, okay? So it's just wrong on so many levels. You really need to come up with a happy medium of sustainability. Remember, 1/3 critters, 1/3 greens and grasses, 1/3 seeds. Stick with that recipe and you're great for your chickens going forward. They're going to be healthy. They're going to have the right omega-3s to omega-6 balance, which is what you want, which is actually heart healthy. That stuff in the supermarket, it ain't heart healthy.
Good for soldier flies.
Yeah, it is. All right, any other questions? Yeah, Tim.
You leave the grubs in the bucket after they've been harvested.
Oh, up to a week. They're not going to hatch out for 1 to 2 weeks. I mean, don't, because it's hot in there and it's dry, and they're not used to it. You want to get them. You want to feed them. I probably use mine once a week. I just Ziploc them. A lot of times you're going to have waves of grub crawl off. So one day it's ridiculous production, another day nothing. So it's waves, and it has to do with the egg laying cycle. I just keep it sort of in a little side bin that's protected from predation, and then I bring it up to my farm. I don't live on my farm, so I bring it up with me, or my friends come and swipe them with their Ziplocs. So.
I have one question.
Yes, Lisa.
I have heard about DNA transfer of GMOs, and since you mentioned it, and they are potentially eating GMO food scraps that may be obtained at a restaurant or whatever, or if you're actually still eating them. What about DNA transfer into the grubs and, it perpetuated by using those scraps?
Well, how a lot of molecules are broken down in life. You have proteins, you have nucleic acids, DNA, RNA. You have fats, you have carbohydrates. Those are the molecules. Unless they're really simple and small, they have to be broken down into their constituent parts. At that point, the alphabet, the language, the coding that translates it and makes it into, manifests it into a protein has been lost because it's been catabolized and broken down. So there's not much threat after it's broken down. I don't necessarily think the harm of GMO is that I can't eat a GMO Pop-Tart and not survive the next day. I'm not too worried about that. What I'm worried about is the ecology. What I'm worried about is that instead of engineering something to handle drought-tolerant temperatures, it's engineered to handle higher levels of pesticides so that you can make more money. Like, how is that even legal? It's just ridiculous. So I'm not worried about them eating GMO food scraps. I am worried about introduction of chemicals, though, Lisa. If you have agricultural chemicals, if you have feces from an animal that's been recently wormed, don't feed it to your pod. You'll collapse the whole colony. Frontline. Keep Frontline away from this thing.
Keep Frontline away from everything.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. Unless you want sterility. Yeah, I mean, if the goal is to not have reproduction, then I guess Frontline.
It is true, years ago, they proved that BT could be transferred, the BT corn, the bacillus could be transferred through bacteria, because bacteria are great for transferring stuff. So they found BT reproducing in the guts of bees who had taken in BT pollen.
It was in the DNA of the bacteria that were in the bees' guts. because they eat a lot of corn pollen,
Yeah.
and they're feeding it to their brood.
Wow.
And
It's more evil than you thought.
It's called lateral gene transfer.
It's kind of spooky.
Yeah.
I don't know much about it. I just know.
Yeah.
By and large, I think you're right that between the microbial activity and the insect activity, but that is a possibility. So the BT corn is the scary one. The Roundup stuff, probably not a big problem there.
You know, they're going to take a wonderful resource, which is BT, and make it useless.
Oh yeah, it was their plan all along.
Yeah.
They said we'll sell you something else. I mean, it's fine by them. Yeah. Okay, so it's time for Brian. But before he starts, before you leave, I want everybody to look at the homemade one. I'm not recommending it, but I want to show you if you don't have money and you want to try and do this anyways, there is a way to do it without money.
And any proprietary words? Take out a video.
The other thing, folks, actually Dr. Richard McDonald's design. He actually does do human manure with one of these. You know, he totally understands all the issues, and so he ages it a solid year afterwards. He totally gets the whole vector issue. But basically, it's a barrel. It's got a sealing ring, so it doesn't have an issue that way. Definitely leachate does come out of this. The idea about putting some holes in the bottom to have leachate come out there would be better. The serendipitous effect of that was I learned about being able to collect all these tiny larvae and refrigerating them and keeping them for longer. And so we just stand this upright. The neat thing about this is the whole thing will tip over. So we can tip it over to get it upright even when it's full, then tip it back on. We'll stand it upright to load it. And what we're putting in it mostly was brewery grain. And I think Karl agrees, the brewery grain is kind of like a crapshoot. Sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't. So we were having to add other high attractant foods to get them to come in. But then they worked it pretty well. We got pretty large colonies. And then what we did is we had it like this. They would lay their eggs on the edges of these holes, and then they just go in. And when they were done, they would just crawl out down bottom. Karl was saying probably the reason they knew to crawl out that way is they're attracted to the airflow. So they would crawl out, and they would fall into, we put a bus tub below. Problem was things would come heated out of the bus tub. So what I figured out is get a bus, if you live in the Asheville area, what's it called now, FRS, it used to be Asheville Showcase. A tub with a lid is like $5 or $6. And so next what I would do is buy it with the lid, and I would then cut out a fair amount of the lid and put a piece of rat wire in there. So then they'd fall through, and not as many things, but a coon easily would get into that, So you would have to protect it more from a coon. But it worked pretty well, and Richard encouraged us to turn it probably for aeration, and so we could turn it and get some aeration, though it's not like a compost turner, it's going to turn in big clumps, so you're not going to get tons of aeration. But that's it, pretty straightforward.